My time,
Recording in progress.
my time starts now. The resolution we are affirming today is that concert goers ought to be able to recover money damages in court from performers who start concerts substantially later than the scheduled time. This is a value round indicated by the word ought, and thus the criterion for this round is the most amount of good for concert goers. This should be the criterion because at the end of the day, celebrities gain all their profits and fame from the people who support them and go to their concerts, meaning that these people should be their top priority. As some background, we'll just read the info slide. Two men in the Bronx have alleged that a recent Madonna show in New York City began more than 2 hours behind schedule, disrupting their plans for the next day and complicating their transit home after the show ended at 1 a.m. Some definitions we're defining substantially in this round as 2 or more hours behind the agreed upon schedule. Our first advantage is consumer rights. In the current uniqueness, one, performers should cater to their consumers. Subpoint A, like I said previously, performers owe their pay and revenue to their fans. That's why people get so upset when people like Doja Cat diss their fans, because she owes it to them to be remotely polite. And it's super rude to ask people to come to a concert, have them make all the necessary plans and arrangements, and then delay the concert repeatedly, forcing people to wait in the cramped heat for additional hours and ruining their plans for the next day. Subpoint B, this is a net bad for performers as well, because a heated controversy regarding fans and performers tanks performers' reputation, and leads to tons of bad press and leads less appreciation for the performer. Look to Madonna, who's facing crazy heat and pushback because of this delay. Subpoint C, patrons may be forced to pay extra for babysitting, rearrange work schedules, or even miss crucial connections. The financial and emotional toll on a patron is considerable, leading to demand for accountability from the performers contributing to these disruptions. Subpoint D, look to Lauryn Hill, a celebrated artist with an illustrious career who became famous for her habitual tardiness, frustrating both fans and organizers. Her consistent delays led to disappointment among fans who eagerly anticipated a punctual start, and this tanked her reputation. Our second uniqueness point is economic loss. Subpoint A on this is that attendees may incur financial losses due to the delayed start, such as missing public transport, incurring additional childcare expenses, or missing work the next day due to extended hours. They should have the right to seek compensation for their losses. Subpoint B, look at Morgan Wallen, whose ticket cost up to $4,000, and he canceled a show after making people wait for hours at the venue because he lost his voice. He offered extremely minute reimbursing, but many concertgoers were outraged, saying that he needed to reimburse them for transportation, hotel fees, merchandise, gas, and food. These are all utilities people need to spend, and making them suck up more utilities by wasting their time and forcing them to stay late into the night to see the whole show is a violation of the tickets agreement. Subpoint C, delayed concerts also puts a strain on event organizers and patrons. These event organizers dedicate significant resources to coordinate performances, covering expenses such as venue staff, security, and other personnel. Prolonged delays incur additional costs and strain the relationship in all aspects of the business. Subpoint D, delayed concerts also tie into traffic congestion the next day. If people are flooding out of the concert venue hours later than expected, this interferes with traffic and people's schedules. The third uniqueness point is time and schedule commitments. Subpoint A, often concerts go late into the night, but they're supposed to end at like 11 or something reasonable. When someone, like the people from the info slide, agree to end a concert at 11 and then go to work the next day at 8, they don't expect to be held there long past 1 just to make their money's worth. Subpoint B, starting a concert significantly later than advertised shows a lack of respect for attendees' times and schedules. Attendees often make arrangements and plans around the scheduled time, and a significant delay can be a huge inconvenience for people. The fourth uniqueness point is fair compensation. Subpoint A, consumers are entitled to additional compensation for the difficulties a late concert provides. Subpoint B, often people miss their public transport, or there are no Uber drivers at the venue so late, or people end up having to stay at a hotel because they can't drive all the way home at 2 a.m. The links for this are 1, increased concert turnout. People go to concerts when they trust their performer is going to go with the schedule promised and deliver good quality music. If there's more incentive on performers to be on time to avoid the legal drama, that leads to happier consumers because they're getting what they're paid for. The next link is less economic loss. If people are actually going with the schedule that they were provided with and are actually getting the public transportation they need, this decreases their economic loss substantially. The impacts on this are first, quality of life. Having things go to plan and not having to miss plans the next day improves consumer quality of life, making them more likely to watch that performer again, increasing performer revenue and performer quality of life. Bad press on a performer leads to tons of stress and financial struggle, like Madonna is facing right now, which is terrible for their own quality of life. The second point is economy. Economic losses can put huge strains on concert goers, especially people with busy schedules who are trying to support the artists they enjoy. And also, it takes a huge economic toll on the industry because concert goers and patrons have to pay for extra staff and additional expenses. Our second advantage is industry standards. The first uniqueness point is trust and reputation. At subpoint A, concert goers trust in the reliability of event organizers and performance, and that is crucial for the success of live entertainment industry. Seeking damages can serve as a way to preserve trust and hold performers hold performers accountable, reinforcing the importance of punctuality in the industry. Subpoint B is allowing concert goers to recover money damages can serve as an incentive for performance and event organizers to adhere to schedule commitments. It encourages accountability and deters repeated instances of late starts. The second uniqueness point is legality. Subpoint A, concert tickets can be considered contracts between the ticket holder and the event organizers or performers. If the agreed upon terms, including the start time, are not met, it constitutes a breach of the contract, providing a legal basis for seeking damages. Subpoint B, Andrew Panis and Antonio Vallada sued Live Nation and Brooklyn Academy of Music and Madonna in February 2020. Madonna was faced with similar lawsuits before. During her 2019 Madam X tour, she was sued multiple times for starting concerts late. Getting sued harms the brand of the artists and depopularizes their concerts. The third uniqueness point is health and safety of concert goers. Despite tickets having a start time of 7 p.m., Beyonce often starts her shows way past 10 p.m. on some nights, leaving fans stranded with no transportation, food, water, and other things they didn't expect to miss after attending a concert. Some got very sick while being stranded in the rain at the concert venue. The concert finally ended at almost 1 a.m., and fans said this isn't just a case of tardiness, it's a case of due negligence, deceptive fraud, and a complete disregard for her fans. A class action lawsuit was filed against Beyonce and Live Nation, making her more prompt and more on time in the future. Attendees relying on public transportation face challenges getting home if the concert extends beyond operating hours. This is a huge problem. The links on this are the first, incentive to start on time. Subpoint A, legal action taken by concert goers may contribute to setting industry standards for punctuality in live performances. This could encourage performers and organizers to prioritize timely starts just to avoid legal consequences. Second is reputation. Subpoint A is getting sued hurts the image of an artist, while compensating would remedy it and greatly improve it. Once people saw Beyonce improving her concert times after the class action lawsuit, her reputation increased. Madonna's reputation and Lauryn Hill's reputation went down because they didn't actually change because they weren't actually showing any positive change. This encourages people to change to help their reputation and venue. The third link is security and safety. There'll be more concrete end time. Therefore, concert goers won't be stranded in the city or the rain in the middle of the night. The impacts of this are one, safety. It's extremely dangerous to force people to be stranded in the middle of the night without public transportation in terrible conditions like the rain or the stifling heat. It's not safe and could lead to a lot of people getting sick like they did in Beyonce's case. And the second impact is higher trust and reputation of an industry. And for all those reasons, I strongly urge a vote for the affirmation. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, I'm just gonna get out my timer. By the way, I'm Emily. I will be the first speaker for side opposition. Verbal POIs are preferred. Okay, I'll begin my speech of 8 minutes with 30-second grace now. Judges, 3 things in this speech. First, I want to give 1 key observation. Next, I want to go into Ops 2 substantive arguments, and then back to Gov case. Okay, so when we look at this motion, we actually have to look at who is impacted by this motion. Realistically, we think that it is actually very few people. Even if concert goers can go to court and try to recover money damages, it doesn't mean that most of them will. Why? Because taking time out of your day to go to court, prepare an argument for your case, or maybe even hire a lawyer is a huge financial burden on most people who would have otherwise been spending the day working, making money to support their family. Now they have to use a sick day or a personal day. You lose money that they would have made at their job that day and fight an argument that they probably are not even winning. So we think it is fair to say that this round exists on the margins. The working middle and low income people likely will not even try to recover their damages because they know it is ultimately a losing or at least a low impact battle. So we think that only the wealthy, bored people who can afford to get their money back in court will actually do it. We do not think that these people should be that important to the scope of this round because they have enough money that these damages probably won't impact them at all or much at all. Therefore, we think the impacts of this round are twofold, which brings me to Ops 2 independent contentions. First, on the drain in the court system, and second, on the unique harm to fans. Our first contention, drain in the court system. Before we evaluate anything in this round, let's look at our court system right now. Realistically, your case will not even make it to court for a few years. You will be waiting months, if not years, for a court date because of all the backlog that exists. Pending civil cases grew about 8% in 2022 to 138,264. Look at that number. It's a very, very low likelihood that your case is actually making it to court, meaning there's probably no practical impact. You probably don't get your money back. But let's say you don't buy this. We think that there are very realistically few people who can actually go to court and contest these court damages. Why? Because most people are somewhat aware of the sunk cost fallacy. They know it's not actually beneficial to go to court and contest the decision. Why? Two reasons. First, status quo bias. It's difficult to actually take action to contest something, even if you think it's wrong. For example, most people who get a parking violation that they think is incorrect don't go to court to contest it, even though that's technically doable. They just complain about it for a bit and move on because doing things are very difficult. Second, ambiguity. There's a clear bright line on what constitutes significant disruption. People have to prove preponderance of evidence in a civil case and aren't going to do it out of fear that they'll waste a whole day in courtroom and still probably not get their money back. If these two men in the Bronx tried to go to court and say, my plans were disrupted for the next day, my transportation was disrupted, any judge could just say that the cost of public transportation is not that much and there is no way to actually determine the cost of the next day's plans. Again, it's very, very hard to prove that there was a significant amount of money lost and prove your case. Additionally, we would say that financial concerns. This is the most important warrant. Insofar as your day is already messed up, maybe your boss is mad at you for showing up late, maybe you're late on your rent, you are going to go to work to make money. Most people can't just afford to go to court on the low chance that they can make a little extra money. For the wealthy, for whom that's not a concern, the emotion doesn't really impact them anyway because it's like $100, which is just like a tiny sum of money for them. So we think that, again, most people won't even be willing to go to court because of the financial burden it actually adds to them. But even if Gov is right, and there are some people who do go to court, we warrant that these are more likely to be somewhat well-off people. Why is this bad? We think that cases being brought in front of the court is zero-sum insofar as that there's a limited number of judges and courtrooms in the United States. This creates a huge drain on America's already overtaxed legal system, and we think that it's probably fair to assume that other issues like family courts, like divorce, etc., should probably take precedent over this issue of people getting mad that their plans were disrupted after a concert. This round is essentially low impact at its core. Okay, our second contention is on harm to fans. The thesis of this contention is that counterintuitively, performers are actually going to be able to start late more often while people continue to lose money through damages. We think that even though most people won't be suing for damage, there's a perception that they can, and thus there's less moral recourse or pushback against performers who start late. People no longer have the moral weight of being the victims of late performers. There's a perception that the problem is already solved because angry fans can just get their money back in court when realistically they can't actually. There's a perception that the legal system has already solved for all the concert problems. So these people, this is going to like clash with a lot of what Gov said. So the people who are running these concerts, so the performers actually have more of an incentive to start late because they're like, I don't care. There's no moral recourse. People can just go to court. It's not a big deal. This is independently a place to vote up because insofar as the court system is likely to be used by few, the scope of this outweighs as lateness impacts all fans. With that, let's move to side gov case. A lot of it you can just cross-apply side opposition's case. I'm kind of unclear on like where the contentions start and end, so I'll just be giving like 4 substantive refutations that I think take down most of Gov's entire case. Essentially, this whole argument that we get from Gov is a principal argument. They talk to you a lot, judges, about how concert goers have the right to get their money back. People's time should not be wasted. People should be entitled to get their money back, to not have to suffer through bad traffic conditions. Sure, we agree in principle, but that's not actually what this round is about. We actually have to look at the practicality, and insofar as Gov has no impacts, they cannot win. Maybe people have this right. Sure, maybe all of these things are true, but Gov has no access to their impacts because people's cases probably don't make it to court, and if they do, there's an even bigger financial toll on them because they can't go to work that day. Gov might tell you that like, oh, they can just go to court on a Saturday, but it's probably the day that it's hardest to go to court. It's probably easiest to go to court during the weekday. Most courts aren't even open on the weekend, so they probably have to go during the workday, meaning this is a huge financial burden on them. The second observation is look at the status quo. there's not that much legal backlash for concerts starting late. Counterintuitively to what they tell you, concerts probably start late some of the time, and concert goers still go. It's not that big of an issue overall. The issue with Gov's entire case is that it's a huge over exaggeration of what happens at concerts. It's cherry picking a couple concerts. There are thousands, if not millions, of concerts in the status quo, and one example of a concert that doesn't run on time and people were really pissed off probably should not be a reason to vote Gov. We think that, like, in general, when concerts don't run on time, it's not done with malicious intent. There was probably some kind of issue in, like, the technology, some kind of issue with the performers, some kind of issue with the traffic. We think that, like, concerts start late, not with any malicious intent, so there shouldn't be any legal backlash for when these things happen. Mistakes happen. People aren't perfect. People running a concert aren't perfect, and we don't think that the legal recourse will solve anything. Third main response is that, like, we don't care about the artist. Gov tells you this themselves. They tell you that performers are fine in the status quo, and this round is about fans because these performers probably have a lot of money. So even if you buy all of Gov's impacts on Madonna facing a lot of backlash and the reputation of artists, we really don't care because they tell you themselves this round is about the impact on fans. But even if you buy reputation of artists, we would say that most people don't base the reputation of the industry or the artist on a concert starting late. This is a huge over-exaggeration of what happens in media. So insofar as Gov basically has no impacts to their case, cross-apply all of the offense we give you on why this will actually be a huge harm to fans and probably concerts themselves. I strongly urge a side opposition ballot. Thank you.
All right, let me get my timer up. Hi, my name is Addison Shamel, second speaker for the AF. Pronouns are she, her. I'll take POIs verbally, be preferred. Off-time roadmap, I'm going to go through my opponent's case and then extend the AF. Anyone's ready? My time starts now. Okay, on the opponent's case. Even they say that even if concert goers can go to court, that doesn't mean most of them will, but this is untrue. But the fact that they do proves that they have been violated by the artist. Again, look at how many people got sick after Beyonce started late. People reported having to wait in the cold rain and having to wait for transportation that was not functioning late at night, and how this led to most of the lawsuits that were filed against Beyonce. My opponents say that taking time to go to court is a huge financial burden on people that would have been working, but realistically, we take out the majority of your offense with our point on accountability. If 2 or 3 rich people file class action lawsuits against celebrities, this encourages the performers themselves to be more punctual, to be more on time, and this in turn benefits the majority of concert goers. Again, look to Beyonce, who became more punctual after this lawsuit was filed, and how her reputation increased because of this. My opponents say on their contention about drain on court system that people are like waiting years for court dates because of backlog. Again, this won't occur. Successful lawsuits like the ones in our warrantation deter performers from this tardiness, which is uncontractual. They automatically feel better about this. My opponents mentioned up the status quo bias, and it's difficult to take action or contest something, even if it's wrong. But look to the status quo and how many lawsuits Madonna received after her concerts. Look to how her Madame X tour in 2019 received many lawsuits, and look how she's getting sued again from this other example by the 2 fans. My opponents say that you're going to go to work to make money, and people don't go to court to get money, but people go to court to get money, but people go to court to get justice. People feel violated by these health and like safety concerns that these late performers are incurring. Again, look to how people are getting sick in the rain, how people are stranded in the dangerous city without any transportation to get home at like 1, 2 a.m. My opponents bring up this contention about harm to fans. Judge, you're not going to buy this. Performers, they say that performers are going to start late more often if they lose money. But I'm going to remind you of the quote. Fans said that in the case of Beyonce's original tardiness, they said that this isn't just a case of tardiness, it's a case of due negligence, deceptive fraud, and it is a complete disregard to her fans. Again, fans feel violated by these performers that are wasting their time and not respecting their time. They're leaving work and coming to this and then having to go again to work super late the next day. My opponents will tell you that people will start late and they're going to get sued anyways, but this is simply not the case. We tell you in the first advantage that it is terrible for performer mental health to have to deal with lawsuits, to have to deal with like fans outraging. Mental health to have to deal with lawsuits will like go down with the performers themselves. And we tell you the burden on Madonna financially and physically is huge right now. She's forced to scrap her reputation, and this will make a difference. My opponents will tell you that we don't care about the artist, but really under our wing thing, it's Under our weighing mechanism, which my opponents don't contest, our criterion is the most amount of good for the most concert goers. But this inherently increases the quality of life of the artists themselves. Artists that have a good relationship with their fans, that are transparent, that communicate, tend to do well. Thus, their career skyrockets, and they are more happy as a result. My opponents tell you that not much backlash recurs to concerts starting late. Like the artists become apathetic and don't care that their concerts are starting late because they're getting so much legal backlash. But this is just not true. This is not like a descent of events. Look at how like repeated tardiness tanked Lauryn Hill's reputation. It's something we've warned it out to you in our first speech. My opponents tell you that we're cherry picking concerts and like our warrants, but this is contradictory to your own case. You're saying that the legal system will be backed up from a minute amount of concerts, and this simply won't occur. But 2 or 3 lawsuits on habitually tardy performance just improves quality of life by forcing performers to be accountable, and thus increasing the quality of life for the artists or for the concert goers that decide to go. Again, going to a concert is a huge financial burden. People go to there expecting to have an amazing time. It's like a once in a lifetime experience often. Again, my partner tells you in her first speech that people are spending up to $4,000 on these concerts. And when they run late, people are angry. They're not having access to transportation, food, safety, and they're getting sick outside. This is a huge impact in our round. And Judge, you should be focusing on this when you make your decision. My opponents say that mistakes happen. It's not malicious, but mistakes can delay a concert up to an hour tops. They shouldn't take over 2 hours. Again, our definition substantially everything in top of case goes to AF. That in itself are super malicious. Again, look at how fans said that like performer showing up late was just a case of like negligence and unappreciation to the fans, not from a mistake. My opponents tell you that the AF tells you that we don't care about the artist. Again, this is not true. Our quality of life impact affects everyone in this res, not like. Again, as the concert goers' quality of life improves, the performers' quality of life will improve as well. And my opponents say that most people don't base their reputation on a concert starting late, but look to Madonna's reputation plummeting. Twitter, TikTok, all these social media platforms are outraged by Madonna repeatedly starting late. If you search up Madonna's name, her Twitter results are the first thing that comes up because people are pissed about her starting super late, repeated time and time again. So, Judge, you're not going to be considering any of their points on the drain of court system because our accountability uniqueness points take this out. Again, if 2 or 3 rich people file this class action lawsuit against celebrities, this encourages the performers to be themselves more punctual. Again, we have access to our incentive to show up early link, which means we have access to all of these like industry benefits, and you're not going to buy their harm to fans because, again, this is not true. This is contradictory to their case itself. If artists are showing up on time, the concert goers are going to be more happy as a result, thus improving the quality of life for the concert goers and thus improving the quality of life for the performers themselves. I'm going to be extending points from our own case that go undercovered or not interacted with at all. On our first advantage about consumer rights, my opponents don't respond to the fact that patrons may be forced to pay extra for babysitting, rearranging work schedules, or even miss crucial connections. The financial and emotional toll on a patron is considerable, leading to damage for accountability for performers. Yeah.
Don't people have to pay more for babysitting if they want to go to court all day?
Well, our point is like when people go to concerts and have to pay for like unexpected fees, then it's an unexpected financial loss for the concert goers that have to unexpectedly wait late. Back on the case. Yeah, again, we tell you about Lauryn Hill, who's a celebrated artist with an illustrious career, became infamous for her habitual tardiness, frustrating fans and organizers. Her consistent delays led to disappointments among fans eagerly anticipating a punctual start. Again, we show you how these reputations of artists go down because they're habitually late for their performances, and how this in turn decreases quality of life for the fans and the concert performer as well. We tell you how delayed concerts also put strains on events organizers and patrons. These events organizers dedicate significant resources to coordinate performances, covering expenses such as venue staff, security, and other personnel. Prolonged delays incur additional costs and strain the relationship in all business aspects of the business. Again, we tell you how performers showing up late because of their negligence of their fans and of their duties incurs like a strain on the business itself, and incurs strain on the artist himself, and also it costs all these like safety concerns for the concert goers. We tell you how delayed concerts also tie into traffic conditions for the next day. If people are flooding out of the concert venue later than expected, this interferes with traffic. We tell you about these spillover aspects and how this affects like all other parts of the city, not just these concert goers or the artist himself. We'll tell you how starting a concert significantly later than advertised shows a lack of respect for the attendees' time and schedules. Again, this is a huge theme in this round is lack of respect. The concert goers are going to be really pissed if there's like lack of respect is constantly getting violated by this disrespect for their time. Again, we tell you about increased concert turnout. This is a main link. People go to concerts when they trust that the performer is going to go with the scheduled promise and deliver good quality music. Again, communication and transparency is a huge part of like going to a concert and the fan concert relationship. If there's more incentive on the performers to be on time and to avoid legal drama, again, creates more of an incentive. This leads to happier consumers because they're getting what they paid for, and a happier performer because they know that they're delivering the correct like quality of performance to their fans. Again, we tell you about legality. Don't buy any of my opponent's points on legality, like court backlog. This is not true. Legality just serves as an incentive for concert performers to start on time. Concert tickets be considered contracts between the ticket holder and the event organizer performers. In the agreed upon terms, including the start time, are not met, they may constitute a breach of contract, providing a legal basis for seeking damages. This is especially true when people are getting sick in the brain because their concerts are getting delayed. They're missing transport because it doesn't happen that late at night. People are having to be stranded in the city, get hotels at like 1, 2 a.m. This is terrible for quality of life. You're going to be buying our impacts about safety and the reputation of the industry. For all these reasons, I strongly urge vote AF. Thank you, judges.
Amazing. Is everybody ready? If everybody's ready, then I'll start my time now. Order is going to be Gov case, op case. Let's start on Gov's first contention. What is the crux of their argument? All of their argument is based on this one singular link, which is about accountability, right? Everything that they tell you here kind of falls under the umbrella of accountability. That's how they try to get access to their main impacts: impact of performers, impact of consistent lateness on fans, then the financial help and fairness argument. I'll get to all these impacts later, show you why we mitigate them or turn them to our side. It's reasons to vote op and not gov. But I want to first start on this accountability link. Why do we turn accountability? Why do we actually independently win on accountability? Let's look to the status quo. What shouldn't you be taking into account about what Gov tells you? First, don't vote on their example of Beyonce and people standing in the rain. People standing in the rain who file a class action lawsuit on like health damages there, it's totally not relevant to this round because that's not about like the scheduled lateness. That's about them having to stand in the rain. That's about any sickness that they got from that. That's going to be totally different. But then what you want to consider is the analysis that Gov gives you in their speech, which is that people have a ton of backlash against performers who start late. They give you the example of people's response to Beyonce when they tell you that they think that it's an act of like fraud and negligence. Okay, what does this mean? It means that the primary impact of someone like Beyonce is going to be on her reputation. Emily gives you this analysis in her speech and it goes conceded. If you are a wealthy performer, and all of the examples that we've gotten from Gov are wealthy performers because the people who can afford to start late are people like Beyonce and Madonna. It's not like a smaller performer. For these people, the main impact to them isn't like the few $1,000s that they'll lose on the class action lawsuit. The main impact that they want to gain access to is reputation. So we have two cases here. There's the performers who do care about reputation and the ones who don't. Someone like Madonna is an example of someone who doesn't care about reputation. If in the status quo, Madonna doesn't care that she always starts her concerts late and no one, like, people are mad at her, but they still go to her concert, she's still really wealthy, she's not going to change that behavior when she suddenly starts losing a few $1,000s per concert. She's incredibly wealthy. That's a drop in the bucket to her. If she doesn't change things, she's not going to change them under Gov's side of the house. But then there's the people who do care about their reputation. Why do the people who care about their reputation, why are they uniquely more likely to start late? Why do they get less accountability on Gov's side of the house? Emily, again, gives you this warning in her speech and it goes dropped. She tells you that for these people, there's always going to be a perception in the status quo that the concert goers are the victims, right? It's like these hapless victims who wanted to go to a Madonna concert, but then little did they know that she ended up starting late and then that cost them all their transportation and their babysitting fees or whatever. These people are the victims, and that puts a ton of pressure on performers to change their behavior. We can see this in the Beyonce example. The reason why Beyonce had to change is because she was facing these allegations of like fraud and, I don't know, neglecting her fans, not because she lost a few $1,000s on a class action lawsuit. The few $1,000s doesn't mean anything. It's the impact on reputation, and the impact on reputation exists more on our side of the house, where people are more viewed as the victims. Comparatively, on their side of the house, Emily tells you people are no longer viewed as the victims because it's seen that they have an alley to recourse, they have an avenue to recourse through the legal system, and thus they no longer need public outrage on their side because they no longer need to say, oh, like, look at these fans, look at all the negative impacts to them, because there's this perception that they can just sue their performers. We think this is really bad because it means that A, Gov loses access to all their impacts. If there's no more accountability on their side of the house, they don't gain access to anything they tell you. But then second, you can turn this because we warrant out to you why there is less accountability on our side of the house. The primary source of accountability for someone who makes their money off of like the opinions of the public is going to be their reputation. We gain access to that. Gov diminishes that impact. Okay, now let's go into their three main independent impacts here, and I'm going to show you why all of them turn op in as well. First is on the impact to performers. We think this is realistically not that much within the scope of this round. We don't really care what happens to Madonna at the end of the day. And we think that if you care about the fan performer relationship, you probably actually are incentivized to vote op. Why? Because performers and fans have bad relationships if the fans are always suing the performer. I don't know. I think that if performers are consistently late, the negative impact here exists symmetrically. Impact to performers isn't a place to vote gov. Then is on the impact of consistent lateness. We think that this impact is really mitigated. They give you the example of Lauryn Hill. Presumably only Lauryn Hill fans go to Lauryn Hill concerts. And if it's characteristic that she's always late, I think most fans can probably expect that she's late and they can plan ahead of time for that. Consumers have some sort of obligation to be at least somewhat logical about the goods that they're consuming. If in this case that's going to a performance, we think that they have some kind of obligation to know okay, Lauryn Hill's always late. I'm not going to show up early to her concert. I think the impact of consistent lateness here is really low. Again, it's really marginal because the accountability link ends up falling. Emily gives you this analysis. It gets dropped in the MG. Don't let them give you responses to it in the PMR. And then is their final impact here. And this is the thing I think they're most likely to collapse on because they kind of try to tie in this principled argument here too on fairness. And it's this argument on financially helping people, right? They give you a lot of rhetoric as to how it really, really harms low-income people if they have to find babysitting for their children because the concert ran late. Two responses here. First, turn this, if concerts are more likely to run late on Gov side of the house, they automatically lose this contention because insofar as people are going to, the concert's going to end late on either side of the house, you would rather them end late less often, which is what we get on op, than have them end late more often, which is what you get on gov. But then they're probably going to try to tell you, no, they outweigh, because not only do they have the accountability link, even if they don't have access to that, people are still going to be able to sue. They're able to get their money back. But what they fail to interact with is this analysis that Emily gives you, which is that for most people, they're not bothering to go to court. She gives you this example of a parking ticket, right? She tells you that it is possible in the current legal system to contest a wrongful parking ticket. And the vast majority of people don't do it. Why? Because the financial harm outweighs the benefit. I'm going to get to this more in op case, but the only real gov response here is this analysis on the Beyonce concert. And the thing with the Beyonce concert is not relevant because that's about people being mad about having to stand in the rain. The vast majority of people, even if there are small class action lawsuits, are not going to be suing. They're not going to be getting their babysitting money back. If anything, they're losing money by going to court. What people like to do is they like to complain. They like to go on the internet and say, Madonna started her concert 2 hours late. I'm so mad about it, but they're not actually going to do anything. They don't gain access. They don't have solvency on financial help. Now let's go to our side of the flow. Let's start on ops C1 on drain on the core system. Gov responds to this just by telling you that they solve because of accountability, because 2 to 3 rich people filing class action lawsuits helps the harms reputation significantly. Again, we tell you reputation is already harmed in the status quo. It's harmed to a greater extent. Then they tell you that they don't care about the court system backlog. We think this is actually really important because court system backlog makes it difficult for actually important cases to go through the civil courts. We think that if you care about the class action lawsuits against people like Beyonce having to stand outside in the rain, you probably don't want there to be more backlog in the court system, which is what Gov has on their side of the house. But what's really important here is the central warranting that the vast majority of people aren't actually getting their money back. Gov's impact here, their tangible impact, is very, very little. But say they're right. Say there are some people who do manage to get their money back because some people feel like they have been so deeply wronged by Madonna that they cannot help but drag themselves to court, probably lose money, have to spend more money on the babysitting, more money on transportation in order to get a small sum of money back. Fine, maybe that's true, but that's a really small scope and it gets clean outweighed by our second contention, which is on the harm to fans. We tell you the most important thing to a performer is going to be their reputation. We tell you the extra amount of money is really marginal. Emily gives you this analysis, again, goes clean, dropped in the MG. What does it mean? This means that concerts start later for everybody, not just for the few people who can afford to go to court. I'm about to go to Grace. It starts later for everybody, not just the few people who can afford to go to court to get their money back. The scope here is huge because performers feel like they can afford to start their concerts later now. There's less public backlash against them for starting their concerts late. This means that there's going to be less of an avenue for accountability. Emily gives you the analysis. She gives you the weighing. Performers, and I give it to you again in my speech, performers only care about their reputation. The money doesn't matter. The question you have to ask yourself at the end of the round is who gets the most impacts on reputation. I think it's abundantly clear that this opposition never been prouder to oppose.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that. Just gonna get out my timer. Okay. I'll begin my speech of 4 minutes starting now. Judges, I'm going to do 3 things in the speech. First, I'm going to tell you what Gov is probably going to try to say in their PMR. Secondly, I'm going to look at the main crux of the debate and show you why we win it. And thirdly, if you don't buy anything I'll say, I'll tell you a clean, unique reason to vote op. Okay, so what are the 2 things that Gov is probably going to tell you in their last speech? They're going to say that the status quo sucks for fans. They have to pay for hotels. They have to deal with traffic. They have to pay for babysitters. They're going to give you this super exacerbated basically principal argument for why this concert lateness is so bad for fans. However, 2 responses we give you that pretty cleanly take this point down. First, concerts don't start late because the artist feels like being malicious. There's probably an issue with technology. There's probably an issue with staffing. Lateness is unpredictable. The potential for lawsuits will not stop technological issues. Likely there are concerts that start late in either world. Likely most of them don't have a huge impact because when people go to concerts, they assume that there are thousands of other people going. They assume that there can be these issues. They know that this is a potential. Concert lateness happens in either world. Legal backing cannot fix problems of staffing and technology. Secondly, even if you agree with principle, with everything Gov says, we tell you that all of these events are exacerbated if they bother to go to court the next day, right? We tell you like most people won't go to court, but let's say they do bother to go to court. Lateness still exists. However, in Gov world, people are now trying to go to court. They're now taking time out of their day. They're now trying to fight a battle that is probably not winning. They now have to pay more money for babysitters, more money for lawyers, possibly spend an entire day in court and not make any money that they could use to support their family. This is a huge financial burden on fans. We care about the quality, the well-being of fans first and foremost. Secondly, they will try to win on this idea of the reputation of the artist. However, again, 2 responses that pretty cleanly take this down. First of all, we would tell you that like Madonna already has a pretty good reputation. She doesn't care that much about one concert being late. People aren't going to stop listening to her music. This is just not a reason to vote for them. But secondly, we tell you that like we don't care about the artist that much. They try to say that like, oh, the artist's reputation impacts the quality of life of all the fans. This doesn't make much sense. One concert being a little late doesn't impact quality of life of fans that much. But again, we don't care about the artist. We care about the impact on most of the fans. So even if you buy that the artist is an important part of the debate, 1, they probably have a lot of money, and 2, the scope of the fans that are going to court the next day probably outweighs. But finally, let's look at the main crux of this debate, the main reason why you're probably going to be voting off, this issue of accountability that they try to use to take down our entire case. Flow through our entire perception point. This wins op cleanly right here. They don't even try to engage with them. We think that at the point at which there's probably more accountability on our side of the house, we have to win this debate. Why is this true? Because our perception point, which I tell you in my first speech, which Zoe extends, basically says that even though there isn't actually that many cases that go into court, there's this perception that the problem has been solved. So there's no actual moral pushback or moral recourse for performers who try to start late. So counterintuitively, they're going to start late more because they think, oh, people like Madonna, people like the super rich artists, people like the not rich artists think that, oh, okay, people can just go to court if there's an issue, so I don't actually have to try to fix the problem. So actually less gets done. There's less accountability. Don't buy anything they tell you about accountability. And then they try to make this response that like 2 to 3 rich people filing class action lawsuits is going to solve the problem of accountability. Just gut check this. The court probably won't even look at these 2 to 3 people's rich lawsuits. They probably don't even care. This has basically 0 impact. But if you don't buy anything I tell you, where do you vote op cleanly? I tell you in my first speech that this is a pretty low impact debate. There are probably way more important cases in court, like divorce cases, like custody cases. If people are trying to bring these cases to the courts, now there are more pending cases in the courts, which means that there are less important cases are being heard, which means that people who have family cases, who have divorce cases, now don't get their cases heard. So you vote for op at the point at which we cause less backlog in the courts. We allow people whose cases actually need to be heard to get heard. For that reason, and for all of the reasons I outlined above, so proud to oppose.
Okay, I'll start my final speech. Off-time roadmap, I'll just be weighing our impacts and talking about some contradictions they make. And my time starts now. Judges, you are voting CampoSM on the government side on the weighing mechanism of most amount of good for concertgoers, which is extended through all 3 AF speeches and goes uncontested. This is the cleanest way for you to vote in this round because the government is the only side that provides actual benefits to concertgoers. The impact weighing on this round is voting for Gov on our impacts. We have access to safety and economy, and the opposition only reads benefits for the supposed benefits for the consumer, which we've already turned to the government side. They don't interact with the economy impact at all. So let's go into that really quickly. We tell you that in the status quo, our impact is that economic losses can put huge strains on concertgoers, especially people with busy schedules, and also put a huge toll on the industry. We tell you that starting concerts significantly later can lead to event organizers who dedicate significant resources to coordinate performances and cover expenses of staff and security, having prolonged delays and huge economic burdens and losses, straining the relationship on all aspects of the business sector. They don't interact with this point at all. And this is the cleanest way to vote in this round because this relationship between consumer and coordinator straining leads to less quality concerts and terrible business incentives for all parties involved, leading to huge economic losses, not only for the consumers, but also for the artists and also for the companies and also for the staff. All of these things are clear conceded. And this is a clear problem here. We also have this warrant and this impact of quality of life. Having things go to plan and not having to miss plans the next day improves consumer quality of life greatly, making them more likely to watch that performer again. Bad press on a performer leads to tons of stress and financial struggle. We tell you that Madonna currently is facing terrible harms to her quality of life because of these class action lawsuits that are successful. They try to tell you that these action lawsuits are never successful. We give you 2 examples of them being successful, the one against Madonna and the one against Beyonce. They try to say don't give them access to their Beyonce warrant. However, they clearly don't interact with the fact that these delays that caused people to wait in the rain were caused because the concert was delayed and there wasn't any public transportation out so late at night. And the huge backlog from this public transportation issue caused people to be forced to wait in the rain. People were forced to wait extra hours in the rain waiting for Beyonce to come and perform. All of these things happened because of her delays. All these people got sick because of her delays. And this class action lawsuit forced her to be less tardy. It held her accountable. We are the only people in this round who actually give you warrantation on how this makes celebrities more accountable. They don't give you a single instance of backlog in the courts. They don't give you a single instance of people not taking these seriously. You have to vote on Gov because we actually have warrants to our impacts. The clear misconception that my opponents make is that more fans will go to court. However, this is simply not the case. A couple of people going to court, like they're currently doing against Madonna, inspires the fans and makes the fans feel like Madonna is going to be more accountable and that she's going to show up to our concerts on time. People who are actually getting these class action lawsuits to go through benefits the entirety of the fans. They don't actually have to take time out of their work to spend more on babysitting. They just have less tardiness in the concert, which is better for their economic growth overall. They also don't interact with our Lauryn Hill contention in the way it's supposed to be. We tell you that her career ended because of this habitual tardiness. We tell you that her reputation plummeted because of this tardiness. We tell you that all people care about their reputation. We tell you that it is the only way people make money. We tell you all of these impacts only are accessible on the government case. They try to say we're basing everything on a single link of accountability, but we give you a really clear link chain on this impact. We tell you that if more people are going to court, if there's a few people going to court, and that would lead to more accountability due to the fact that it's terrible for these artists to have to go through the financial struggle of going to court. We tell you that these artists hate this process. We tell you that this just leads to more accountability because people don't want to go through the legal framework here. They say quality of life is not impacted much by concerts being late, but we give you the warrantation about fans getting sick. We give you the warrantation about people missing their time commitments for the next day, not getting to work on time, having to purchase hotels, all of these negative things, people getting stranded without public transportation. We also give you this huge traffic congestion point that they don't touch on at all. The impacts here are citywide. It's not just one person. It's not just the fangoers. We're giving you such a wide spectrum. You're voting for government because safety and econ outweigh court backlog, which is their only impact on magnitude. Safety is of the utmost importance and descends into quality of life, which is uncontestable. It also acutely affects the concert goer and the concert provider. Performers, concert goers, and business media are all greatly impacted by the government side, whereas the opponents just simply let all of this drop. We give you clear warrantation. We give you clear impact weighing. We outweigh on magnitude. And additionally, their only point of court backlog here doesn't even flow through due to the fact that they contradict their own case by saying courts are going to be backlogged, even though no one is taking these allegations to court. This is a huge contradiction that they make in their case that they simply don't address, that my partner brought up in the MG. And for all those reasons, for the impacts of economy and safety, you must vote for the affirmation. And I'm so happy to affirm. Thank you so much.
Ballot. So congratulations for making it to this round. You all did wonderful. It was a 2-1 decision for the Gov. So should I give feedback first, or like does the squirrel want to go first? I don't know.
Can I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So wait, I don't know. Is Emily here?
Yeah.
But okay, awesome. So I voted opposition. I did not have a hard time deliberating this round. I thought the opposition won pretty clearly. And the reason, okay, so let's see what I wrote down. So in general about this debate, this was a value debate, and it was not really treated like a value debate. I get like some analysis in the first two speeches about whether or not like there's a moral obligation that exists. And I get like a concession from Op at the beginning of the first speech. It's like, oh yeah, there is a moral obligation for like artists, like there is a moral argument for like artists being able to like get sued for this and like concert goers being able to get their money back, right? And if this was treated as more of a value round, I would have definitely voted for government, because Op just concedes that, you know, there's some moral ground to art, like to patrons being able to sue artists. But it wasn't really treated like a value round. And what kind of happens, in my opinion, throughout the round is that both teams kind of miss the ball. It's the question that kind of determines the round is, will this suing actually deter artists from being late to future concerts? And that is never really articulated by any team throughout the round. And why do I end up voting opposition? Well, first, what happens is the op mitigates this impact, like mitigates whether or not this will actually deter future concerts from starting late, because they say, oh, like most of the time it's technical issues, right? It's like there's issue with the sound set, there's like issues with whatever. And Gov tries to say, oh, like mistakes only delay concerts for an hour tops, which is just like, be for real. Like that's just, you're just like pulling an hour out of like nowhere and be like, oh yeah, mistakes only last an hour, which like, I just don't believe you. Like, I don't know. I've been to concerts and there have been issues. I'm sure maybe they're lying to me and saying, oh, the technical issues last a long time. But like, you can't just be like, oh yeah, mistakes only last an hour and expect me to like mean that they're not relevant anymore. So in the case that there is like some technical issues to the concert, right? What exactly happened? Well, opposition tells me that like, oh, okay, let's say someone sues because of a technical issue and it gets backed up in the court, whatever. I don't really care about things being backed up in the court, mostly because opposition tells me that this will like hurt divorce cases and like family cases, which are not tried in civil courts. Like there's separate divorce and family court for like custody stuff. So the examples that opposition gives me is just like, I don't actually care. But regardless, that's like the side tangent. But regardless, so what actually happens when the event is late because of the artist's fault, right? Like how does this actually change artists' behavior? Well, I get this analysis from Op that you have two artists. Either artists don't care from the get-go and are probably not going to care if they have to pay like $3,000 in like reimbursing like the 10 rich people who went to their concert and who are planning to sue them for their concert tickets, right? Like I'm like pretty much believe, like, for example, if we look at the example of Lauryn Hill, it's not like Lauryn Hill stopped coming late to concerts, right? She just did it anyway. She just didn't care. And I will say, you know, there are still massive Lauryn Hill fans. You know, I like a little Lauryn Hill. Who knows? But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that if artists don't care about showing up late in the first place, they're probably not going to care about like any punitive like money damages that are made. And I pretty much believe them, because I mean, the government tries to tell me, oh yeah, Madonna's quality of life was seriously hurt by like people like suing her. And I was like, be for real. Like, Madonna is a billionaire. She does not care. Madonna has so much money. Madonna can sell out any concert, whatever. Same thing with Beyonce. Like, these people do not care at all about like some money that they lose in court. And so I'm told by opposition that what artists do sometimes care about is their reputation. And so this I'm inclined to believe, like, oh, like if Beyonce starts a lot of concerts late, and she gets backlash, then she like starts showing up to concerts on time. And government tells me this. Government is like, oh yeah, like Beyonce started reforming her practices. She started coming to concerts on time. And I'm like, okay, but that happened without there being massive legal proceedings, right? The example that government gives me is like in the status quo, right? If you're telling me that these artists are changing their behavior because people are being outraged, then I believe opposition that the thing that is changing their behavior is people's outrage and not actual court cases. So I have a hard time believing that actually suing these artists, the mechanism of taking these artists to court, is the thing that's going to change the behavior and not the actual backlash on the reputation. Instead, I get this argument from opposition that because there's now this like pathway for legal proceedings that exists in the new status quo, then artists can kind of get away with being late and can kind of like avert the blow to the reputation because now it's seen as like, oh, okay, everything is fine now. Like, oh, like it's fine. Taylor Swift paid like $3,000. She's cool again, right? And she's not actually required to change her behavior, which is an argument that's never actually responded to by government. And why I don't think this is like a tremendously compelling argument, like, I mean, I am inclined to agree that A, either artists just don't care in the first place, or B, the court proceedings don't do that much, or C, that the court because they don't do that much, the court proceedings at worst will actually make the problem worse and give the artists a free getaway pass. And so that's why I vote side opposition. I mean, a couple other things I want to mention that I thought about throughout the round. Government's basically all impacts. We're talking about what happens when a concert gets delayed. They're like, oh, traffic congestion, whatever. Right. And, given these impacts, right, it's not like, people, the average working person who gets back really late from their Beyonce concert and has to get up the next morning at 6 a.m. for their shift because of it and has a miserable day afterwards. That person is not actually going to reap any benefit to being able to sue in court, which I believe. Like, I think both sides kind of agree on this consensus that like the average Joe is not getting anything tangible from this, right? But B, like the harm of the concert still happens even if there's a civil lawsuit, right? So like what I mean to say is that like it's not like you're preventing harm that's already happened through this case. Instead, you're trying to prevent future harm by, again, like saying like, oh, in the future, artists won't be late. But because I don't really believe side government that this will actually deter artists from being late or concerts from running late, I just don't actually see Gov having access to virtually any of the impacts. Because the only thing you talk about is like what happens when concerts are late. If this round was framed as more of a value round, whether or not there's actually a moral obligation and there's a like whether or not consumers have the moral right to sue for breach of contract or whatever, then I would have been much more likely to vote for side government. Because again, OP makes explicit concessions on this case. But because side government frames the resolution as most amount of good for concert goers, and like basically people approach it as a policy, I evaluate it as a policy round. Other things I want to talk about. Oh, briefly on government organization. On the first speech, I had a really hard time figuring out what is a contention and what is a subpoint. Mostly because people switched up the wording. People were like, now moving on to our third contention. And then I was like, wait, I thought this were like on subpoint 4. And then people were like, wait, now it's a second contention. And I was like, wait, I thought the third contention was already done. How are we on our second contention right now? So I was like pretty confused by the first government speech. That being said, I basically wrote down everything. I think what happened is I basically wrote down each of your subpoints as separate contentions because sometimes they were called contentions and sometimes they were called subpoints. But that's okay. Sometimes people just have like 20 contentions on their flow, and that's like kind of fine. Not really, whatever. Other things. Oh, I thought it was really clever for side government. You know, opposition made a really big deal in the first or in the last two speeches, being like, "Oh, Gov is going to collapse on this," and then you guys didn't collapse on that, which was kind of cool. I was like, "Ooh, you guys know how to do debate." And yeah, so that was my reason for being the squirrel. I'm interested in hearing what the government judges have to say.
Thank you. That was so informative. I loved it. Okay. For me, this round boiled down to four issues: safety, economy, court clogging, and accountability. And no one did some weighing at the end. Like no one did some real weighing, as in no one told me like, oh, this outweighs on magnitude, time frame, probability. So it was really hard. Because there was no weighing, there was also no meta weighing. So I default to the weighing mechanism of benefits to concert goers. So with that being said, I'll start on the affirmative flow on economy. I don't want to evaluate this due to your weighing mechanism. The strain on businesses seems incompatible with benefits to concert goers. I feel like you needed to clearly establish that this strain harms concert goers most, and recovering money damages improves the situation specifically for concert goers. The most I get here is that you say there's like decreased quality concerts, but this isn't really terminalized. Like you don't really tell me the ways in which like it's decreased in quality. You do a better job of this when you move on to safety. So we'll talk about that there. I don't think you really should have focused on like strain to staffers, strain to the artist, things like that here, because you don't directly relate it back to the weighing mechanism. So it's really hard for me to know what to do with this. It's kind of just like floating. And then in terms of safety, I find that this is easier to understand with regards to the lens of the round. I buy that delays directly harm the concert goer. I also buy that lawsuits can increase accountability, not that they always increase accountability, which in turn decrease delays, therefore benefiting the concert goer. So that I thought was pretty straightforward. I know that David had said that it's outrage that causes the artist to change their behavior. But I actually think here that Gov does a good job of demonstrating that lawsuits are a form of outrage. So even if there is some like financial burden towards the concert goer has decided that this burden is enough because they are motivated by justice and not just like the financial costs of engaging in this legal process. So I do buy that lawsuits are a form of outrage, and I give AF this argument. On the nug flow, it's court clogs and accountability. Court clogs to me just wasn't very believable. I know that you start with reputation, you say that reputation is harmed, and this to me is like really confusing. Af says that the reputation of an artist is harmed due to like a lack of due to the delays. They're doing this due to like a lack of appreciation. You say the delays happen due to technical issues. You don't really say how often this happens. And you also don't really say like how these tech issues leading to delays and so on substantially increase backlog enough for you to access like the repercussions on family courts and whatnot. And even then, there's no examples here demonstrating that the people you are talking about are harmed from such backlog, and this isn't weighed. So I'm not really sure, like, again, how to evaluate it. And then on accountability, I thought there was like a lot of potential here, but personally, I find that it's not really fleshed out enough for me to be comfortable voting. I just don't think it's like as terminalized and as straightforward as the app does it. So in terms of how this particular round went, I am far more inclined to buy government and what they said in terms of safety and quality of life. So that's where and why I voted the way I did.
All right, not gonna lie, mine is probably gonna be the most incoherent and least make sense, I feel. So I was like very kind of like flip-flop, like, oh, like not gonna lie, like I was initially like planning to like vote con, like not gonna lie, like in high school as a PF debater, so I mostly think of it like pro con, not like gov off. Like I did probably debate in college and it still like kind of confused me. I just say pro con. I'm sorry. So or like af neg. So I think just kind of like top level thing. Like I agree with like David. Like the app case was like so confusing. Like I like do like college debate and like even I don't hear cases that complicated. Like please, like I like please never be like sub sub point A, sub point B, sub point A. Like there's literally a part of my flow. Like I don't know if you could see it. Like I have sub point D and then like and then you go to E, then you go back to A, and then like you guys don't say contention three, and I'm like, what? Like it's just so like confusing. Like also, I feel like you guys kind of like repeat a lot. Like I'm like, I could have sworn like contention one subpoint A has like overlap with like contention like three subpoint B. Like I think you guys should have like I guess been more concise and like combine things that were overlapping because like the warrants were very confusing. Like your opponents were very confused. Like when they got to your case, they were like, on my opponent's case, I don't really know what arguments they're making, so I'm making like four responses in general. Like, I don't know, I think y'all try to kind of go for the oh, if they don't understand our case and we spam a lot of warrants, they're gonna have to drop something. Which is like, like, I was a debater, like everyone like reads a lot of things hoping it get dropped. It's like, oh, it got dropped, like ah. But also like, like it's confusing. Like it's how I see debate is like it's not my obligation as a judge to be perfect and like flow everything you say. It's your obligation to make sense. And like even though you make less sense to your opponents and they're more likely to drop things, you also make less sense to me. But like I also ended up voting for you guys, so like I guess if what works, like oh well. Um so anyway, going on into like the I guess substantive part, I think it kind of does mainly come down to like this argument of like what actually leads to artists having tangible change. Insofar as the two pieces of offense that come out of the neg are this backlog argument and like this C2 turn on like perception. The main argument coming out of the affirmative is like this argument of like, oh, lawsuits like increase accountability and it's like so much better for fans. Um, so like the reason I don't buy backlog, one, this kind of contradiction argument brought up by the affirmative of like, oh, there's not going to be that many cases because no one wants to really take time out of their day. But also like, oh, there's going to be backlog. Like this is a contradiction that is made by the negative. I think a way the negative could have resolved this and made it better for them is articulating it as a double bind. It's either A, they don't get offense because no one goes to the courts in the first place, therefore there is no impact, therefore you default neg, or B, there is backlog, in which case your impact happens. So I think if you guys articulate as a double bind and then went for that as offense, I think I might have been able to vote for backlog, but B, it's like kind of, I guess, not really like well articulated on like what necessarily like this impact is. C, the framework of this round is concert guards, which is conceded by the negative. Therefore, even if I were to consider backlog, it doesn't factor into the weighing mechanism that was both agreed on. So I just kind of like don't consider this backlog argument. And like on the idea of like, oh, like people taking time out of their days, like it's kind of, I guess, cleared up that's like a class action lawsuit. And like most people don't attend class action lawsuits. It's just like I know, like my family always sends me like these class action lawsuits, like, oh, like you get like a couple dollars if you like fill out this form. I'm like, okay, like I'll do it. And then they just like Venmo me like a couple dollars. Like I assume like that's how it's probably gonna work like with most of these concerts. And that's kind of how it's articulated. So like I think on the like kind of warrant level debate, like I totally agree. Like the neg, like their argument, sorry, the ass arguments about like accountability are probably like in real life pretty nebulous and like not true. But like I think it wasn't necessarily articulated or responded that way by the neg. So like I think would Madonna and like Beyonce like and like Lauryn Hill like are they actually like really hurt by like losing like a couple $1,000 in relation to their massive amounts of wealth? Are their quality of lives like really going down? Like probably not. But like even though this is a bad argument, it's a bad argument that's not necessarily responded to by the like neg well, I would say. In the sense like I guess um like they do say like, oh, it doesn't have an effect. But the affirmative is like, oh, but it caused them to be less late to their concerts because they got a lawsuit. And it's like, oh, if the result is this, and I have clashing warranting, like, oh, like they totally care because like it affects their reputation, like affect the money they have. And like, oh, but this perception, like, I guess I know definitively, and it's more clear that what the framework the app sees the world of like, oh, if we have lawsuits, people are more likely to come on time and giving examples versus this like nebulous perception argument. Well, I guess like I do like believe the warranting is like pretty legit. But again, like I guess there's no examples, but like I guess kind of the trap of that is it's hard to give examples for like things that don't really, I guess, exist. Like, or I guess the way that could be examples could have been given, just like these are examples in which outrage has happened because no one sued, and then because of that outrage, instead of people suing, it people went and like yeah, it had an effect. But I guess like the fact that they brought up examples of lawsuits specifically having an effect, and there wasn't terminal examples of like, oh, these are instances of outrage exclusively pushing people. And there was an articulation by the neg of like these instances where there was lawsuits. It was mainly the outrage, and the lawsuits were a byproduct of the outrage. If that analysis was made, I think I would have been able to vote neg. So I think one, if the neg made analysis like, oh, outrage leads to lawsuits and is the root cause, you decrease outrage. I do think like the argument like of outrage being the root cause, like I guess was made, but not necessarily like, oh, lawsuits aren't key. I think having more defense on like lawsuits not being important is something that was missing because it's just like, oh, I have this empiric, like it's worked in the past with these artists, but not necessarily these empirics from the neg. I think the empirics element and the examples element was what I was missing. And if I had those, like I think the warranting and like the link level debate, like the neg is winning. But the fact that the app has like some link and like examples, I guess like makes me kind of like air app in that I know it's materialized, but I don't necessarily know whether the neg has materialized. I think a second way I might have been more willing to vote neg is like, I guess more like an argument perhaps relating to like, do these do like lawsuits actually like hurt their reputations? Or like, I guess like whether a negative event actually hurts the reputation of an artist. Like for example, like literally like James Charles got like canceled for like being a groomer, but like now like no one cares. Like, like artists can like be straight up evil and then like will they forget like next week and be like, hoo like did you see like James Charles like new ex like blah 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 blah. Like I think making arguments just relating to like, these people like they could literally like kill someone. Like and we would forgive them like in a week. Like I think just making arguments relating to and like hammering in the fact that like, no one really cares like the evil stuff like artists do. And like if anything, like giving them more publicity, like the fact that someone sued was literally like, was something so newsworthy that they decide like, oh, let's make a debate topic out of this. So clearly, like, I feel like if anything, like these kinds of lawsuits only like increase their reputation in the long term, insofar as more people hear about them. Like, I wouldn't have Madonna on my headspace if it weren't like, newsworthy created by this. But like otherwise I wouldn't think of it. So like I guess like yeah, I think if more arguments were made in that regard, I think the app could have won more cleanly if they focused more on the link debate, because you guys focus on the impacts and saying we outweigh on magnitude, but it doesn't make sense to outweigh on magnitude if the argument that they're going for is linking into your argument. Because they're saying, oh, we have a better link to your argument, we outweigh on magnitude, you guys have the same impacts. So I don't fully understand that one. But yeah, so sorry if that was like verbally like incoherent and everything. Like I low-key woke up at like 8:55 and I was like, "Ugh, I have to join the Zoom. So sorry. I also like look super sleepy like when I like joined the call. But anyway, sorry if like that was like weird and silly. But yeah, that's my feedback. If you guys have any questions for me, like the neg team, like you want to like roast me, being like that was weird and silly, and like what about this on the flow? Like, please, like I know I'm an imperfect person who flows imperfectly.
One thing I was gonna add after hearing your RFT was it would have been so interesting to hear what would happen if like concert goers sued the artist and the concert goers lost. And the artist was like, I did not do anything wrong. Like maybe that would have the opposite effect. Who knows? But that was not an argument. That was
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Thank
luck.
And thank you guys for a good round.
Good round.
Thanks,
Thank you.
judges.
Bye.
Bye.